Welcome to the Rhino Rank podcast, where we talk about all things marketing, SEO, and business growth. As always, I'm Jack, and today Jess and I are joined by someone making a real impact in the industry, Areej AbuAli. Areej is a leading technical SEO consultant and the founder of Women in Tech SEO, a global community that connects and uplifts over 40,000 women worldwide. She's also a celebrated speaker at events like Brighton SEO and MozCon, and recently published her first book, Community Building for Marketers, a practical step-by-step guide to starting, growing, and leading a successful community. In this episode, we dive into the power of community, how to get involved, and what it takes to create one of your own. Areej, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you for having me.
Of course, thank you for joining. It's brilliant to be here with you. We're also joined by our fantastic Jess. Jess, how are you doing?
Yeah, I'm not too bad, thank you. Excited for another podcast episode.
Yeah, well, that's what we'd like to hear. So to get us started, Areej, do you want to give us an introduction to yourself? Do you want to give us an intro into your journey into SEO, where you started, what initially drew you into this wonderful world?
Yeah, I've been in the SEO industry for a little over a decade now. I started agency side. I was primarily focused on technical SEO. I did that for a little over 5 years. And then I moved to the in-house side. I worked with brands like Zoopla and Papier. And then I did my own freelance consultancy work. Women in Tech SEO is a community that I started a little over 5 years ago. It was like a side passion project of mine that I just kind of started purely from trying to find a sense of belonging and, struggling to find my own community and people within the SEO industry, specifically within technical SEO. And for the last 2 years now, it has become more or less my full-time job. So I've kind of left the SEO world behind, and I've been focused on all things community and events, which is super exciting.
Brilliant. In terms of that spurs quite a good question, actually. How do you feel leaving the SEO world behind?
It's not great, to be honest.
Yeah?
Especially with everything that's happening right now and all the constant changes. I'm not going to lie and say I miss it. I'm still very much ingrained in it because, yeah, we have tens of thousands of members and we host events and conferences worldwide. And so I'm still very exposed to the industry and the topics and all the changes that are happening. But I don't do SEO myself on a day-to-day basis now, which is, yeah, I think it was probably a good time to leave with everything going on at the minute.
You're avoiding that world of it depends. You've completely eradicated that, which is fantastic.
Yeah.
Another question: if you look at yourself from when you originally started, do you feel like you've achieved that sense of belonging now? Now you've established this fantastic community. Do you think that that's helped?
Yeah, I love that question. I think for sure, in my first few years in the SEO industry, it did feel very overwhelming.
Yeah.
It's very hard to, speak up, ask questions. You worry a lot about is that a good question? Is that not a good question? And it was always very difficult to even just attend industry conferences and so forth. So starting the community, I always say was, very selfish reasons in a way where I did just kind of want to find my community and my group of people. And now, yeah, it does feel, very different. Was recently attending another edition of A Brilliant Brighton SEO, and we always have our WTS meet and greet to happen there, where hundreds of brilliant people kind of show up, and even a lot of people who are attending solo and by themselves get to meet other community members and have buddies. So it definitely feels a lot better at the minute for myself, and I know for many others in the industry as well.
I think it's definitely a huge sense of achievement because, like you say, you did this for selfish reasons, but I imagine your selfishness is helping a huge number of people that were probably originally in a very similar situation to yourself.
Yeah, I think it's something that a lot of people struggle with for sure, the sense of belonging, and something we talk a lot about in WTS is our code of conduct and the WTS way. And, our values are to be kind, to be helpful, to be a judgment-free zone, which I think is something that people might struggle to find, not just in our industry, but in any industry. And yeah, I would say a lot of people have definitely benefited from that over the years.
I actually joined Women in Tech SEO on your Slack channel. I think it was just over a year ago now. And the amount of support that you get from people, and you can just put in your ideas, put in your concerns, whether they're about the work environment or just marketing in general. It's been completely invaluable for me personally. When I first started in marketing, that was about 6 years ago now. There wasn't really anything like that at the time. So all the learning that you had to do was all either textbook based or it was just your own trial and error. Whereas now you've got these amazing communities like Women in Tech SEO where you do have that sense of community and you've got other people that you can talk to about things in your project. So I think it's definitely helping a lot of people. It's exciting.
That's so good to hear. And yeah, like I would say, the general term community is one that is being used a lot now, and folks in general are like trying to. I mean, when I started WTS, I don't think I even called it a community. The first few years, I probably called it like a group or a network or something along those lines. But the word community derives from gathering folks who have like a shared experience or like a common thing that they want to gather around and a topic. And my job really is to just like provide that environment and like make sure that it's guided by a code of conduct and that we have initiatives running and events and so forth. But all the work comes organically from the actual members who ask questions, answer questions, interact with one another, like show up for things and share opportunities with one another. And we see that happen not just in WTS, but in a lot of other spaces in our industry in general.
In terms of getting to where you are now, obviously, I know I mentioned at the start with you have now over 40,000 members, which again is a fantastic feat. Obviously, you didn't have 40,000 members at the start, so how did you get there? What were some of the challenges you faced in building this fantastic community?
Yeah, I think community marketing in general is one of those like long-term games. So it's not something that's going to happen overnight. And it does
Yeah.
take a long time to kind of go from you started something, then it grew, then it scaled. And I would say one of the consistent things that we constantly did like over the years is like the number of initiatives that we always held. So one of our very first initiatives was like our mentorship program, which we still run to this day. I think we're at like edition number 8 at the minute. And that is something that was really missing from the industry, where it's like a free mentorship program and you match mentors and mentees and they help support one another in the industry. And then I would say like a lot of even though we are primarily an online group where our most active channel is Slack, but then it's our in-person conferences and how we grew those over the years as well. Started off with our London conference that we always did around International Women's Day. And then in the last few years, we've grown it to Philadelphia, Portland, Berlin, and Melbourne happening this year as well. So it's gathering folks in person in one space as well, where they can all meet and interact with one another. So I think it's this idea of ensuring that there are always initiatives that get people excited and continue to tune in, because it's so easy to have someone join, but not easy to retain them and have them stick around and have them constantly go in, check the channels, ask questions, answer questions. So that retention really comes from, the number of initiatives that you run and how you run them, but then also from like surveying your members and understanding from them, what's working, what's not working, what is it that they hope to find more, and giving them a voice so that it's not like a dictatorship where you're the one who's just saying, okay, this is what we're going to do and this is how we're going to do it, but actually understanding, well, we have a lot of folks who are based in North America, so it makes sense to take our festival to the States as an example. I feel like there's this nice tipping point that happens where you are no longer the one who's doing a lot of marketing yourself, but your members are marketing on your behalf. And when that happens, it just becomes this like explosion of word of mouth where a lot of folks keep joining because they were referred from a friend, a colleague, a boss. They heard about us through a conference meet and greet. They heard about us through the mentorship program, and it's definitely not overnight, and it's something that just is like a long term game. But once it reaches that nice tipping point, it just keeps growing from there.
You've kind of answered the next question as well in terms of how the community has evolved. So, like you say, you're the one doing all of the marketing, you're doing all of the hard work to try and bring on these new members, but now your members are actually doing it for you, which is fantastic. But that's because of all of the hard work you've already put in. So you're evolving by allowing essentially everybody to join in that is interested, which is brilliant.
Yeah, and I'm sure even like we're an independent community, but if even we think about companies like yourself, so agencies or brands or in-house or SaaS platforms or whatever it may be, when we think about it, we probably realize that it is a lot of like word of mouth, or it is a lot of referrals, or it is a lot of I use the service, I work with these people, I work with that team, and they're brilliant, and you should go ahead and use them as well. So I'm sure you probably through your work as well, like experienced something very similar.
100%. And I think that's typically how Rhino Rank actually grew to begin with, was word of mouth. We started relatively small with the two co-founders and a couple of members of staff. And when you'll know how it is in the SEO industry as a whole, if somebody likes something, they're going to tell everybody about it. It'll be on LinkedIn. Same way, if somebody doesn't like something, it's also going to be on
Yeah.
LinkedIn. But it very much was a case of word of mouth. If somebody likes the links you're building, these people know they need links. They're going to share that with their friends if they found a good source. So absolutely, completely agree with that. In terms of your own experiences, how did they shape your view on importance on a community as a whole? Where did that stem from? But what made you hold that almost great importance on community?
One of the things I struggled with the most coming into the industry was there always seemed to be this idea of like spaces that are very exclusive. So you could
Yeah.
only be a part of it if, you know, you spoke on stage before. You could only be a part of it if you were like the founder of an agency or so forth. And so, you know, this idea of, well, how about we start a community where it doesn't really matter at what stage in your career? Like you could be someone who still wants to learn about SEO, doesn't know much about it at all, and someone who has a decade of experience. And then how beautiful would it be to like combine these groups of people who have such a different range of experience and knowledge, like all in one space, because they will all be able to then help one another. And I think this is, you know, where the mentorship program stemmed from as well. So I think it was kind of looking into what was missing, you know, in my career and what was missing in others. It was the same as well with, you know, we host 5 conferences a year now, and we always diversify our lineups. And we always ensure that we give a spotlight for first time speakers too. And we have, you know, a brilliant speaker trainers who work with them. And same with our knowledge hub, where, you know, it's like a publication where we pay our writers and we have like an editor who helps them as well. And we make it a point that like English doesn't have to be your first language. You've got tons of knowledge. We have an editor who's going to be able to help you get it to its published, but we would love for you to share your knowledge. So I think it was like a combination of, you know, what was missing and what wasn't happening at the minute in the industry, and how we can kind of use WTS to like set a statement, which then would hopefully like motivate and encourage like other parts in the industry to also take part in that.
It's almost a celebration of knowledge, isn't it? A
Yeah.
celebration of experience, which is absolutely key because, like you say, I've seen in the industry before, you have a group of people, they've been friends for 15 years and they feel like they might know everything, but they're not open to somebody that's from outside the group that doesn't have their knowledge, but they have their own experience. That person has gained their own experience from their own work, their own testing, and definitely in the SEO industry. Just because you might have a slightly different opinion doesn't mean that opinion isn't valid. Doesn't mean that your experience hasn't been earned, it hasn't been gained. So that's fantastic. It's fantastic to see that is the case. We'll move on to the next section. Jess, do you want to lead us onto this of why SEO communities are a game changer?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think, at least from my perspective, I feel like SEO communities almost create that safe space, don't they? So it doesn't matter your background, it doesn't matter how long you've been working in the industry, or what brands you've worked with, or who you are, and if you've been a professional speaker before, if it's the first time you're kind of putting yourself out there. Good SEO community makes you feel seen and heard, and also makes you feel safe enough that you can ask the questions that maybe, you know, you've got a bit of anxiety over asking, or maybe you've been told, oh, it's a silly question, you should know that already. But what else would you say makes a strong SEO community apart from that?
Yeah, I mean, I think like you touched on a few points there. One of our, and I just press again on our code of conduct, because one of our rules, for example, is, you know, there is no such thing as like a stupid or a silly question. I remember like in our first year where a lot of questions would be asked and caveated with something like that we just had to put a rule in place. And the fun part is over time, I no longer have to go in and remind folks, FYI, you know, there's no such thing as silly. Other members do that on my behalf upfront. So it's almost like we're all in this space because we want to discuss like our collective career goals and help one another in a way that's, you know, kind and helpful and respectful. And I would say there are communities that might, especially when it's a safe space, might then think, well, you know, let's use the space to rant about the industry or rant about the world or so forth. And that is something that we put a really hard line on, where no, we're here to amplify one another and we're here to help and support one another. We're not trying to fix the world's problems or even the industry problems. That's not something we're going to be able to do. But what we can do is help support each and every person inside the group. And, you know, we do that through like our different initiatives and through the code of conduct and like the values that we have and how we like can model that as well. So I would say having like a really, really strong code of conduct with strong values and rules that you kind of make sure that you constantly remind new members of, but also like current members of as well.
Yeah, and I think that's probably reassuring for a lot of people to hear. Because I know when I first started in marketing, the amount of questions that you have noted down versus how many you actually ask, there's probably a big discrepancy between those. I remember I used to have notebooks and I'd fill them with all the questions, and then maybe you would end up asking one or two of them, and then you'd kind of park the rest. So it is nice to hear that there's an environment and there's a space people can go where they feel supported enough to open and be vulnerable almost.
Yeah, of course. So in my book, Community Building for Marketers, we talk a lot to companies as well who have kind of almost like built that community-like experience with their clients. So I guess it would be cool to also hear from your end, how that's been like over the years and how that's evolved, where it does feel like you have like a strong community ecosystem with your clients as well.
Yeah, Jack, do you want to take the lead on that one? Because I know that you were speaking to a couple of clients earlier today.
100%. I think it's being able to share your knowledge and expertise, but in a way that it doesn't cost anything. And that's been absolutely crucial for how Rhino Rank has grown over the last 18 to 24 months. Whenever we speak to a prospective client, we want to be able to share our knowledge, share our expertise without saying, well, no, you have to pay us for this knowledge and expertise. I know when I've been on calls with clients, it's very much been a case of, here is our recommendation, here is our knowledge and expertise. If you wish to work with us, fantastic. If you prefer to go with somebody else, that's not a problem. And it's that sense of being able to share your knowledge and allowing people to gain from that and develop their own understanding and learn, that almost builds that community. And I think we've kind of built that with our account management and client relationship, in the sense of, if they have a question, if they would like a recommendation, if they're not sure how to approach something because it's slightly different, absolutely, we want to hear that. We want to hear your questions. We want to help you develop. And it's very similar for us to say, well, if our client has seen something, we want to hear it as well. Because if they're seeing something different to us, if they've maybe taken a different approach that's worked, fantastic. We need to learn from that, because again, we need to adapt. Like you mentioned at the start of Areej, when we have so many updates in the wonderful world of SEO, we constantly need to adapt. We need to change. So we need to hear from our clients. So it almost is a case of, whilst our clients are knitting together and sharing information, we're building, I guess you could say, almost small communities, but building our own community with our own clients. And I guess from a socials perspective, again, that's something that we've not really delved into, but that's kind of why we have this podcast. That's kind of why we've started doing these podcasts, because we want to be able to, again, share our own expertise, but also share your fantastic expertise and share your knowledge and experience with our clients, prospective clients, or people just interested in digital growth, in marketing as a whole, which is absolutely crucial. And that, I guess, is going to help us build that greater sense of community too.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Yeah, I think it's always interesting to kind of see with, different brands and how it is that they build, like a community like feel. And yeah, I think communities don't necessarily need to be like these closed spaces that have specific folks in them. It is also, email is considered a form of community. Social is considered, this podcast is considered a form of like external facing type of community. So that makes a lot of sense.
I think a good example is Semrush, and it's one I refer to all the time. Their socials are fantastic, but again, they built that. You could almost class that social community of people being interested in what they post, and yeah, they might post funny memes here and there, but they're always trying to give something that is of value. So absolutely, I think they're a good example of that.
It's like they help you professionally, so you're able to learn something from them, whether it's about SEO, whether it's about specific type of digital marketing or the latest update in AI. But then they also help you on like a personal level as well. So I feel like a lot of these communities, they give their members a voice, whether it's them speaking as like the marketing manager for XY company, or they're speaking as Jess the individual or Jack the individual. And I think that's really one of the unique parts of SEO communities when they do it right.
Yeah, I agree.
In terms of SEO communities as a whole, then, what would you say some of the biggest misconceptions are, and how they are approached? What, if you have maybe people joining your community, what do you think they're almost conceiving that it is perhaps wrong, or they have misconceived?
I think specifically with ours, because it is in the name, like Women in Tech SEO, so it could deter. And I know from we run annual community surveys that it does deter folks who feel like they're not technical enough from joining. When the purpose is the complete opposite, which is even if it's something that you have any form of interest in, like you're more than welcome to join. And of course, like technical SEO being only one aspect of SEO, we have channels that cover all sorts, content and digital PR and paid and like all the different touch points that can happen in digital marketing. And so there might be a conception of is this community for me, that deters someone from even joining it in the first place and testing it out themselves. And I do think there is pressure in general for folks to kind of put themselves out there. It's very similar to, let's say you go to a conference and, there's a lunch break or a post networking event or so forth, and you might feel a little bit unsure of whether you should attend, whether you should approach people you don't know, and so forth. So I would say even on in a virtual space, it can feel a little bit similar as well, where folks might be deterred from or just generally like overwhelmed with the amount of information that's being offered. I mean, that is one good thing about the SEO industry, is that the number of newsletters and courses and social channels and conferences are a lot, but also can be very, very overwhelming, where someone might not be too sure, well, where do I spend my time and energy on? And it feels like yet another thing that then they have to do by like joining a community.
So if you think somebody is possibly in that almost hesitant phase, what advice would you give them to maybe join a community, or what advice would you give to go and engage? Would just take the plunge, or would you give other advice?
Yeah, I think take the plunge, but also I think it's important for everyone to do like what they feel comfortable with. I think as conference and event organizers, it's kind of on us to make sure that we're marketing it in the right way. And like it's almost like this transparent, honest, open marketing where, this is what to expect, this is what's happening in there, this is what's going on. And also to like not apply pressure on. I have members who are very active in terms of they go in every day and they read what's being posted, but they don't necessarily respond back. And it's like, I think those members are just as important as the ones who are very active and who are very loud and who are constantly posting stuff. Because every now and then, a member who might be more on the quiet side might, come across a question that they are the right person to answer, or may share a job role that someone else in the community comes across and gets that. So I think there shouldn't be any pressure in general in terms of like active versus inactive members and so forth. Something we do in our conferences, for example, is we try our best to always like allocate a quiet room. And the purpose of it is not everyone is, extroverted and wants to meet new people and so forth. Sometimes it can be very exhausting for some. And so, we have a dedicated quiet room for folks who just want to attend the sessions and have some solo quiet time. That's perfectly fine. So I think having that like no judgment environment helps a lot and eases the pressure of folks who are thinking of joining or being part of a community.
It's allowing people to be comfortable, isn't it? It's
Yeah.
allowing people to very much to take what they want, and that kind of is the purpose, I guess, of a community. If you want to join, you might not necessarily always have something to give, but absolutely, if something is there for you to take it, and don't feel guilty. You've joined that community for that purpose, to learn, and if you can, like you say, share your experience, fantastic, go and share it.
We see it a lot in our mentorship program as well, where people would initially only ever apply to be a mentee. And then over time, they apply to be a mentor. And it's this idea of, okay, they've developed this confidence now in their ability. And so now they want to pass that on and give that back. So I just love seeing that evolution happen over time as well, where a member initially joins and then maybe initially they're a bit quiet. And then maybe they just attend one conference and then maybe they get mentored. And then maybe over time they start answering questions. And then over time, they also want to speak on our stage. They want to put themselves forward. They want to mentor others. So it is so interesting to just see that evolution happen over time.
Yeah, it's like there's not a right or wrong way to be involved in a community, is there? It's like you could have people who are maybe a little bit more extroverted who don't mind taking that center stage and sharing their knowledge quite freely and with a lot of excitement. And then you might have those people that are maybe a little bit more reserved. They have more of like a quiet confidence and they do still have something to say and they do still have something to share, but they might not necessarily be the first person to, run up to the start of the line in order to share that bit of information that they do have. They'd much rather either be approached or just pass the information on after an event, perhaps in an email. Like we talked about, the newsletters can be quite good communities as well. It doesn't always have to be spoken word or big presentations or big stages in front of thousands of people. I know, Reed, you were recently at Brighton SEO. How did you find that? Are those types of events really good for building those communities, do you think?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I always, Brighton SEO is probably one of the main ways that we get a lot of new members through the door twice a year. We've been hosting our WTS meet and greet with them for, I don't know now, for as long as I can remember. A lot of our current members would show up, but then a lot of new folks would also show up who, want to learn more about the community and want to be a part of it and so on. But yeah, it's been so nice to see not just with Brighton SEO, but a lot of other conferences around the world people would go on the WTS Slack and ask who else is attending this conference, and then that way they would have like other buddies or other people that they can meet up with, and it doesn't feel as overwhelming going alone. But I think in general for anyone, going to industry conferences, it's finding groups of communities who are already attending and kind of asking if you can tag along or if you can be a part of it is always a much easier, less overwhelming way than showing up on your own and trying to find people there physically.
It circles back to that word of mouth again, doesn't it? It's like, to build a community, it is that like natural recommendations you get. It is those people saying, "Oh, I'm going to this talk or I'm going to this meetup after the event. Come along, meet some great people, and just come and have fun." And if you've got something to share or you walk away and you've learned something, then that's absolutely amazing. But there's not that pressure that there's an expectation from you either. So moving on to our next section then on how people can maybe start getting more involved in communities or maybe even go on to look at creating their own. Are there any tips that you would give people who are maybe looking to take that plunge or looking to take that next step, which maybe they're not sure what to do next?
Yeah, I mean, something I always say is if you can't find a space for you where you feel a sense of belonging, like create your own. Like that's always something that I tell folks. And it's been wonderful to see over the years as well. Stemming from WTS, there have been some brilliant communities that came off the back of it. Like Latinas in SEO is a very good example where, we're an English speaking SEO community and a large number of our members are based in UK, Europe, and North America. We have a number of folks based in Latin America, but not many. And they all met through WTS and decided to like start their own community, for example. And then they can use their own language and they have even more similar backgrounds and culture and a lot of similar challenges that they can focus their group and their teams on. It's almost like this formation of like micro communities that then comes off the back of bigger communities. Just seeing that happen as a next step is very, very beautiful to see. So if you're part of a community where you feel like there's something missing, then like I encourage you to maybe like take a part of it and kind of start your own, and no fixation at all on like quantity is always my advice. It's all about quality and what is the why behind your community and what's the vision behind it and what it is that you're trying to achieve. And yeah, just bearing in mind and knowing that it's like a long-term game and it's not something that's going to happen overnight.
How would you say that collaboration helps build communities? Because I see a lot of people, I'm trying to get a little bit more into LinkedIn, but I see a lot of people on that platform and they'll offer either mentorship to some of their followers, or maybe they'll have other projects that they're working on together. And it's almost like creating those micro communities in a way. Would you say that's right and that there's other things that they can be doing?
Yeah, I think, something we've found very interesting is we launched like our partnership program, for example, a few years ago. And the purpose of that was brands and companies that struggle to create their own communities because it's a lot of work for them to do, partner up with existing independent communities like ours and then tap into our communities. And that's been beneficial from both ends because what companies and brands share with us are a wealth of resource, knowledge, speaking gigs, article writing opportunities, all that stuff. And then they share it with our members who then benefit from it. And then how our members benefit them is when those companies are looking for expert codes, new speakers for their webinars, podcast hosts, and so forth. They want to run a survey, they want to test a beta feature, like all of that, they can then tap into our members. So I think collaboration in the form of partnership with existing communities is something to definitely consider. Because even if a company or a brand is thinking about starting their own community for their prospective clients or audience, they can learn a lot from tapping into an existing community first before they see or decide that they're going to start their own.
Yeah, absolutely. So what would you say one of the most valuable ways for somebody to engage is? Because I know that, you've got a Slack channel, for example, we've spoken about a newsletter. And if there's a community they want to get involved in, but that community has a lot of different maybe channels they use to communicate or channel they use to educate, or they run a mentorship program, even that in itself can be a little bit overwhelming of I want to get involved, but I'm not quite sure how to or where to start.
I think it's on the community organizers to ensure that onboarding is as smooth as possible. I feel like a lot of work is on me and on us community organizers in general. But then for the members, it's all about your comfort space. Some people absolutely hate Slack but love attending the in-person conferences. Others are absolutely love Slack but can never make the time to, attend something in person. So it's kind of about where someone's comfort space is and what do they enjoy doing more. Is in-person connection more important? Is virtual connection more important? Do they enjoy writing more? Do they enjoy speaking more? So it's kind of about tapping into what one is comfortable with and then going from there, and and seeing how it goes and how it feels.
Yeah, it's like finding the right fit for you personally and then professionally as well. So you have to kind of like combine the two. Jack, do you have any questions before we move on to the next section?
I think the big one is definitely your book. We have to talk about that. What inspired you to write your book? And how does it tie in to your experience with WTS? Like this is really crucial. And when I saw you'd release your book, I was like, we have to talk about this. We need to talk about it. So where did the inspiration come from?
A publisher contacted me is my very honest answer.
Wow. Okay.
I think writing this book was one of the hardest things I've ever done in my life. Like, I am just not an actual writer, and it was like 9 very, very long months of it's very easy for me to speak and to talk, but actually sitting down and like writing, editing while I'm writing was just so overwhelming and so hard. But yeah, I got contacted by the wonderful Coke Page who said, we love the work that you do. And of course there was this imposter syndrome of, am I really the right person to write this? And they were like, you are the right person to write this because you've created this from scratch and you grew it to the stage. So we'd love to learn like how you did that and what the steps are and what you would do differently if you would go back. And I kind of approach it as a learning process for me as well, where I interviewed and talked to lots of brilliant community builders and managers of brands such as, HubSpot and Sanity and Buffer. And there was like so much learning, not just from independent communities, but also from brands who live and breathe community. And I learned a lot, even just writing it from like these interviews and these touch points with some of these wonderful folks. But yeah, I wrote it out exactly the way that I kind of envisioned the way, WTS has been for the last 6 years, which is, starting it and then growing it and then scaling it. And that's kind of how I divided up the sections. And I touched on all the things that I felt have been crucial for our journey, like our vision and mission, our code of conduct, bringing members on board, but then also retaining them, events and how they help, partnership and collaboration and how that works through, having like some form of like feedback loop. So I cover everything that I feel like I kind of do already day in, day out. I use lots of examples and lots of templates from how I do that within WTS, but then also all the brilliant folks that I got to interview and talk, like a lot of their expertise are also like featured in the book. I am very proud that it's done. I don't think I'll ever write anything again because it was so much hard work. But it is good to, because I do get a lot of questions like for the last few years. Oh, how did you do this? How did you build this? It is nice to now to just say, oh, you can just buy the book because I've written everything out there.
Well, look, definitely don't have that imposter syndrome because that you've earned that for a publisher to reach out to you and say, "Can we get you to write this book?" Like, hats off. You have 100% earned it. You have a community of 40,000 members over 6 years. Yeah, you've earned it. Don't have that syndrome. So congratulations for a
Thank you.
start. What would you say would be one of the top things that you learned whilst actually writing the book? Obviously, you mentioned you spoke to companies like HubSpot, Sanity, Buffer. Speaking to these companies and even speaking to someone like you say, the experts of community to develop this book, what would be the top thing that you learned that maybe not necessarily that was new to your learning, but possibly helped you develop something? So it doesn't have to be a new thing, but possibly something that also developed. It can be new if it is new as well.
I think specifically talking with Buffer, it was so interesting to see how Joel, the brilliant founder himself, like in his very early days, how he always took the time for anyone who would sign up to the platform. So it's a social media management platform. It's brilliant. He would personally ping them a note, ask them why, why are you subscribing to this? What is it that you're hoping to do? Tell me more about your business. That personal touch that he then rolled onto his customer team. And so it was so interesting to hear how that was something that they just had from the start and he ensured like is ingrained until now when they've grown to hundreds of thousands of users. So I think that was a reminder for me as well, like with WTS, It's grown so much now, but it is very important to stick to the roots that worked, which is talk to our members one-to-one, like something I always ensure doing every conference. And I mean, the London one, for example, gets 500, 600 people. I try my best to say hello to almost every single person. Like
Yeah.
that becomes like my mission on the day. I need to talk to as many people as I can in person because it does make a big difference. Rather than wait for the feedback forms to come through in the post networking events, I go around and I just ask people, how do you feel today went? If there's anything you would have wanted differently, what would it be? It's having those touch points with your members and understand, like, there is no community without its members. And so it's so important to understand from their perspective what's going well and what's not going well and what could be done differently, and just ensuring that that's always embedded and that you're constantly working on that. Because everything else, event ticket sales, partners, signing up, number of members, literally none of that matters if you don't have your retained, engaged members who are signing in every day and using the community.
I think that's absolutely crucial, like you say, and that want to try and speak to every single member of that 500, 600 group of people. To me, that is community. You having the want and almost need to say hello to every single person. I've been to conferences in the past or group things, and it's quite easy to just sit on the outside and just feel like you're on the outside because nobody speaks to you. Whereas if you have the main person come and speak to you and say, hello, how's your day going? What do you think? You're part of that. You feel part of it straight away. So I think that's absolutely crucial. And that again, that's probably why you've been so successful, because you've taken that approach. In terms of somebody looking to start their own community, if they're maybe part of your community, and like you say, obviously I think it was Latinas in SEO, I think you mentioned. If you had somebody else in your current community and they wanted to start their own, they wanted to maybe start a micro community, as you mentioned, which is a fantastic word. What would be the main piece of advice you would give to say, go and start your own small community? What would you say to them?
Yeah, I think I always say two things. So one being, be very clear on what your why is. What is the purpose and why is it that you want to start this community? Because that's something that you will constantly keep revisiting over time and making sure that all the decisions you make kind of tie back to that. And then the second being, just ensure that you have a solid code of conduct in place, because your members are going to rely on that and will be held accountable on it. And it's something that you absolutely have to model and will ensure that over time just makes things so much easier when it comes to community management, moderation, and so forth.
I think that why is absolutely crucial. I'm going to reference Simon Sinek here. You may be familiar with it, the Golden Circle. I know he relates it to sales and Apple, but I think that is absolutely crucial. And I think it is key for communities as well, in that having that why, not worrying about what you're doing necessarily, but focusing so much on that why. Because if your why resonates with other people, they want to be a part of it. Absolutely. Why am I doing this? Why do I want to run this community? Why do I want to offer this to people? And again, like you say, if they resonate with that, they're going to want to join. If you're doing it just for the sake of doing it, you're probably not going to have that success. If you're not doing it for a reason, you're doing it for the sake of it. We've shared lots of insights. This has been fantastic, definitely for
Yeah,
communities and people looking to develop. This has been great. So thank you very much.
thanks for having me.
Of course, yeah, no, it's been brilliant. To talk about your book has been fantastic, and how you've developed from, again, having a community of typically just yourself to begin with, just getting it
Yeah.
started to 40,000 members. Unreal, absolutely awesome. If we look now to the future, what trends do you see shaping SEO communities, or maybe even communities as a whole, over the next 12 months and possibly even beyond? What do you think is going to change? What trends do you think are going to influence that?
Yeah, I mean, I think community marketing is on the rise, and especially with how like fragmented social media is at the minute and all the different social channels and what's happening with them and so forth. There is something about community and a lot of brands and companies deciding to rely and invest in them a lot more because they know that this is where you can get really niche when it comes to community, way more than you can with general social, email, lots of other marketing channels. The community marketing, definitely, unlike how niche and segmented it can be, is something that a lot of brands and companies will continue investing in. And whether that's through developing their own, growing their own, or whether that's through partnering and investing in existing ones, I think is definitely going to be the trend that we see over the next year, 2 or 3.
There's one prime example, and I've already mentioned it in the podcast, and it's funnily enough a guy I follow on Instagram and YouTube. His name's Nick Bear. You may be familiar with him. So he owns a company in the US called Bear Performance Nutrition, and he has developed this sense of community. They're big into basically sports and fitness, and this year his company was the main sponsor for the Texas Marathon and the Texas
Wow.
Half
Yeah.
Marathon, which is fantastic. But he's got to that point because he's built this community. He's built this community with his followers. And there was a YouTube video for the pre-Texas Marathon, and everybody was there for, let's say, the 5K shakeout run the day before the marathon. But everyone was there to be part of this community. And they were giving out free hats, and everybody was absolutely buzzing to get this free hat. And then when you see the video of the actual marathon, everybody has the red hat on because everybody wants to be part of this community. And that's, I feel, why he's been so successful and why BPN has been so successful, because their why has resonated with so many different people, like you say, and they built this sense of community, and people buy into that. People want to be a part of it.
I think what you were talking about is completely right. It's not just necessarily having your why, but it's having your passion. Because I think if you could talk about kind of anything that you're doing, so it doesn't matter necessarily what your industry is, what your niche is. You could be, I don't know, a painter and decorator, and you're selling different paints, and your passion is interior design and doing home renovations for people. If you can put your why and your passions together, I think you've almost got a never-ending kind of combination for success in a way, because people will buy into other people. They'll buy into your desires and your passions, and what gets you excited will naturally excite somebody else, because that's what we are as people. We have those shared things, we have those shared goals that we want to go on and achieve. And I know that I've probably gone on a little bit of a ramble now. Circling just back to what we're talking about is how community is going to change over the next 12 months. How do you think women in tech as a community is going to change? Do you have any big plans for this year or for next year at all?
Yeah, I mean, this is the first year that we hold 5 conferences, which is so exciting. We did London, Berlin, and Philadelphia was last year. And this year we added Portland for the West Coast, and we're adding Melbourne for the first time in the
Wow.
mix. And I think we keep rolling the initiatives that work best for us, like the mentorship program and our knowledge hub. We roll back on initiatives that don't work. We did our podcast for a while. We rolled it back. It was a lot of time, effort, and energy. It wasn't getting as much visibility as we'd like it to. What we did instead was we switched our newsletter from monthly to weekly. So I think it's like all a learning curve. We just ran our annual survey, and we're going to sit on like analyze the data and see what comes out of it. And usually this helps dictate a lot of like our planning for the upcoming year. So yeah, I mean it's really fun to work with. I always say it doesn't feel like work, which is the best way to kind of describe it. And I feel so grateful and lucky that this is somehow my full-time job. We just, we take it day by day and we see what our members want and what they're looking for. And we're happy to experiment and like test things out and change things around.
I think it's really important to be willing to try different things and test things, because you're never going to get the perfect answer or the perfect next step every single time. Like, you are going to have things that work insanely well, and then you'll have things that maybe didn't work as much as you wanted to, but it's never going to be done in vain, because you're always going to learn something. And if you've got community, maybe it didn't reach all of your members, but the members it did reach, it will have an impact on them to some degree. So I think it's having that ability to make those decisions on, we'll try X, Y, and Z, and then we'll push forward with what works and we'll pull back on what doesn't. And then getting feedback from your community as well and your members on what they really want to see next. I think that's crucial, because it's like what any company does when they send out feedback forms perhaps, or they host an event, or they sell a product and they want reviews on it to know, is it meeting that need? Is it meeting what you want it to be doing?
We've obviously talked about people being in SEO and the first step to joining a community. Now, what would you say to somebody that is looking to start in SEO? So completely bringing it back. So they haven't joined a community, they've not even started in SEO yet, but they're interested in SEO. What would be your one piece of advice there?
I think, it's one of those industries that it is very easy to get into because you learn a lot on the job. The barrier to entry is very, very accessible. And it's constantly changing, which makes it extremely exciting as well. The advice I would have given 10 years ago is not the advice that I give now, most probably. I think the way I started agency side was probably how I learned so much of my SEO there because of like working with a lot of different clients, and just the speed and the momentum of how things change can be very overwhelming. But also there's a lot of new folks and new generation that is constantly coming within the industry, which just makes it really, really exciting. So yeah, not feeling overwhelmed, and also that there's a lot to learn and there's a lot of things that change up, but it is a very exciting industry to be a part of because of how, things are constantly changing.
I think that's absolutely key. I think if I look back to myself, crikey, 11 years ago when I was finishing college, I probably would tell myself to go into SEO because of how exciting it is not to travel down the route I did travel down and then ended up in SEO 5 years later. I think definitely find a community would be absolutely crucial to almost siphon off knowledge, try and gain from other people's experience is absolutely key. But play. I think that's a key term. Play. Get yourself a website and just play and see if you can get it to rank. I think that's absolutely crucial. And if you can, you're starting to gain that confidence to be able to share your own knowledge. Well, that's it. This has been fantastic. We've obviously shared some fantastic insights into SEO communities and communities as a whole and how to build them.
Thank you so much for having me. I've really appreciated being here and chatting about all things community. So yeah, thanks for having me.
Well, no, thank you so much for joining us. It's been fantastic to have you. I really hope your launch in the US with the book goes well. I really hope that goes as well as it can. Hopefully we can have you on again in the future. That brings us to the end of today's episode. If you liked what you heard, make sure to follow the podcast, drop us a like, drop us a comment. We'd love to hear how you're applying these insights and strategies to your business. We've got more brilliant guests lined up, so stay tuned for the next episode. Until then, this is Jack and Jess signing off. Thanks for listening, and we'll catch you next time.